Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredible webinar. My name is Darren Daraj, and I'm your 2025 Healthcare Leaders of New York Chapter President. Today, we have an awesome webinar with some incredible partners of Healthcare Leaders of New York from Whit-Kiefer. Today's program is From Clinician to C-Suite Executive, Steps and Strategies. How do we help our clinical partners rise up from the clinic, from the practices, from the ORs, from day-to-day patient care into leadership roles, helping ensure delivery of care for all of our communities, local and abroad. It's my honor to introduce our incredible panel today from a Hilney, an ACHE partner, Whit-Kiefer, moderated today for our program, Dr. Raj Ramachandran, along with the panel, Doctors Valerie Weber and Dr. Michael Anderson. Slide. Again, we're so excited to have all of you here today. Please post your questions in the chat, and let me introduce and have Dr. Raj come on and begin our program for our incredible conversation today. Dr. Ramachandran, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. I am so happy to be here with you guys, with my esteemed colleagues, Valerie and Mike. So in terms of just quick background, I am a partner with our leadership advisory practice. And what that means is a lot of the work that I do, that we do in the firm, is tied to executive leadership development, coaching, and assessment, and making sure there's alignment between physician leaders and with the executives in the organization. So we're really happy to be here and speak with you guys about this topic. I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Val to do some quick introductions, and then we can dive right in.
Val, why don't you go first?
Sure. I am Valerie Weber. I am a clinician leader over the course of my career, both in healthcare, academic healthcare settings and in academic medicine, most recently dean of one of our School of Medicines. I'm a principal at Whit-Kiefer. I just noticed on the slide it says I'm a president of something. I am not. So it's so wonderful to be here with you and hopefully share some of the things I've learned over the years of my career. Mike?
Thanks, Val. Congratulations on the presidency. That's
I don't know what I'm president of.
That's
aspirational. Aspirational.
That's right. So great to be with you in New York. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Anderson. I'm a pediatric intensive care physician by training, still board certified. Spent the majority of my career at Case Western Reserve and University Hospitals in Cleveland, Ohio. For 10 years, was just taking care of patients, doing research, teaching, then went to the administrative side for about 8 years, and we can talk about it more when we do Q&A. Was a chief medical officer of different titles, sort of rising to system chief medical officer for the 16 hospital UH system. I went out to California for 5 years, was the CEO of the 2 children's hospitals at UCSF, moved to DC during the pandemic to be a part of Operation Warp Speed as a chief medical officer. And then now I'm 3 years in to being a part of this amazing team at Whit-Kiefer. And it's great to be with you today.
And Mike, you can advance. I think you just have to keep going.
Next slide. This is me. So we thought when we got together, we would just talk from our vantage point. And one of the things of being in a nation or a national leadership firm like Whit-Kiefer is we get to see healthcare across the entire United States. We also do a little bit of international work. And from this physician standpoint, from this leader's standpoint, notice it's in green. It's a really incredible time in modern healthcare. If you think about the diseases we're curing, the new therapeutics we're bringing to take care of patients, the use of AI. I never thought in my career we would see a gene therapy for sickle cell or the use of CRISPR technology to individualize gene therapy for a child. There was just a baby discharged from CHOP in Philadelphia about a week ago who has a very, very rare immune disorder. And the researchers and the scientists and the clinicians at CHOP fixed that baby, cured that baby using CRISPR technology. Just incredible advances in science in 2025. I am not an expert in AI, although Raj has taught me how to use AI on a regular basis. But suffice it to say that AI is changing how we take care of patients, how we run systems, how we do our everyday work. And I really hope it's going to be something that benefits patients and importantly also helps spell clinicians from a lot of workload. And there's also a lot of interesting investments in healthcare right now. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of private equity and venture capital in this, because obviously it's a multi-trillion-dollar thing. So from 30,000 feet, healthcare is really fascinating right now from a good standpoint. Next slide. But this is in red for a reason. Not all is wine and roses, right? I'm sure you live this each and every day. We are in razor thin fiscal margins, if not, in negative territory throughout healthcare. I live in Washington, D.C. I won't talk about politics on this, but suffice it to say, there are so many headwinds, and week after week, there are new announcements or new programs that are cut that I believe are really going to have a negative effect. Cuts to the NIH, cuts to hospital funding, potential cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. So the fiscal storm that is facing healthcare right now is unprecedented, I think, in its scope and its impact, and not in a good way. Our workforce is burned out. We were burned out before the pandemic. We got more burned out during the pandemic. And I think as we're now in this tumultuous time, physicians, clinicians, nurses, administrators are just feeling the burden of this. The American Medical Association tracks physician burnout. I'm a doc, so I think mostly about physician leaders. And it's really a sad commentary that about 52% of physicians right now report signs of burnout. Maybe that number is even higher because more clinicians are underreporting. We've got problems with supply chains. We've got some problem with mental health, both resources as well as how many folks need this. So this is just 4 or 5 examples. You live this each and every day as healthcare leaders. There are incredible advances, really good stuff. But boy, healthcare is facing such uncertainty and such stormy times. Next slide, and I believe that's going to be Val.
Yep. And so this sets us up perfectly to talk about why, as clinicians, those who are experts in taking care of patients, those who, really understand why why this industry exists, to take care of human beings, to help them live up to their potential for health and well-being, why we're needed, why we need to step forward. And we hope to, share some stories and some discoveries that we've made along in our careers. My story is I was a chief resident. I'm an internal medicine physician. I was asked to be chief resident and stay an extra year and do that. And that's when I discovered that I had both an affinity for, an enjoyment of, and I think a talent for leadership. But I had I think now in medical school and some residencies, there might be some leadership courses or things. I had nothing. I had nothing to prepare myself for that. So it was learning on the go. And as I rose into higher leadership positions, I was a medical director first, and then I was a division chief of general medicine, and then I was a chair of medicine, and I was a vice dean of education and a dean of a medical school. I learned a lot by doing, but I also, at certain points, made deliberate a focus on gaining new skills. And in the middle of that, got a master's in healthcare management about in mid-career. So we are needed as clinicians. We must step up, but we need the skills to do it. We need to dedicate ourselves. We need to focus ourselves. And we need to, I think one of the things that's wonderful about a leadership career is it's so full of self-discovery. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is a model that Whit Kiefer has put together, Raj and his team, about the lenses of leadership. Next, please. And these lenses really tell us what we must do to be a successful clinician leader. This little triangle shows the 3 lenses: the visionary lens, which you can think of it as a telescope. So looking into the future, setting a vision, thinking strategically. The operational lens, which you could think about as a microscope. So being able to execute. And the relational lens, you could think about that as a stethoscope. Your relationships with other people in your leadership. And that's where we start thinking about, are we a true listener? Are we a communicator? Can we build bridges with others across the enterprise? Of course, successful clinician leaders always keep patient care and the mission front and center. I think that's the value we bring, honestly, having been at the bedside versus, non-clinician leaders. And all of these other things, these are the things that will make you successful. Resiliency, adaptability, curiosity, and being able to make tough decisions. So that's what we're going to talk about today, with a little bit of storytelling and Q&A coming up next. First, a little bit of pros and cons of why you'd want to take on a leadership role. So the pros, I think the best leaders, the best reason to be a leader is that you have you have a drive to contribute. You have a sincere, authentic wish to make the healthcare system better. And that was where I started my career. I saw that even as a chief resident, through some actions I took and through some talents I had, I made things better for people. And, it just keeps growing over time. And as the CEO or CMO of a big healthcare enterprise, you can impact so many patients, as opposed to the one-on-one impact that you make as a clinician. Um, you really are pressed out of your comfort zone. It allows you to grow as a leader, grow as a human, to have a lot of self-discovery. Those are all wonderful reasons to be a leader, to shape policy, to shape the future, to grow the next generation of clinicians and leaders, which I was so fortunate to do in leading a medical school. The monetary gains is interesting because it depends on your specialty. So if you're a general pediatrician or a general internist, yeah, you might have monetary gains. If you're a Mohs surgeon or other types of high remunerative fields, you might have to take a pay cut to go into some of these leadership roles. It just depends. And it's never the reason to do it. Because next slide. If you were just doing this for the money, you'd probably be disappointed because it's really, really challenging. It does, these top leadership roles, being in the C-suite, it does, of course, you have to acquire a lot of new skills. We've already talked a little bit about that, but it really demands so much time and energy, um, hours, time away from family, and a huge amount of responsibility. I've been involved in seeing institutions through bankruptcies, through major tragedies, of course, through the pandemic. These are things that probably take years off your life, and I'm really not kidding. Um, some people also will resent you and say, "Oh, have you crossed over to the dark side?" I personally do not believe that is valid, but some people will say that about you. And when things go wrong, they go wrong big. You will, if you get high enough in your career and you take enough risks and you do enough important things, you will eventually be fired. I strongly believe that. And you can be pigeonholed too, depending on how your career goes. I mean, sometimes if I think of it as a tree branch getting smaller and smaller. So, as you go down the CMO path, that might close you off to other paths. Once you're a CMO of the hospital and you step down, or a CMO of a health system, well, now what are you going to do? So you have to think a little bit strategically about um, your long-term goals and how to maybe avoid being pigeonholed. I still think the pros outweigh the cons, but I think the biggest thing to think about when thinking about whether you want to step forward into a major leadership role is your why, your purpose. Next.
Okay, I think it comes to me now, Val. So as Mike and Val, you guys know me well enough to know that I can't stick to script all the time, right? So we are gonna have the way I'm thinking about this discussion Q&A portion is we've got about 35 minutes or so. I'm gonna start with a softball question, but then I'll have 4 questions that each of you will address related to the topic that we just talked about. But then I have something called an enlightening round, which is 3 additional questions for both of you. That's going to be pretty open-ended because I want to actually get you guys talking and sharing more of things that I'd love the audience to hear. So with that, I'm going to start with the softball.
I didn't okay any lightning round. Where did the lightning round come from?
Yeah. This is a thought, right, Mike?
You pulled an audible on me.
We gotta go with the good news stuff. So the softball is, give me what's the highlight for the week? Like, you guys, you're in the trenches, you're seeing all this going on. Obviously, challenging times, interesting times. What's been the highlight of the week so far for each of you?
Like right now in our present roles?
Right now, in this week.
Oh, I love connecting people into the right roles.
Yeah.
So we're, closing in on some finalists for some major roles, and it's just thrilling to make that connection, to work as a connector and to make a difference both for that aspiring leader and for the organization in finding that right fit. I get to do that all the time. It's fun.
It's a highlight every week. Okay, Mike, what about you?
I got two highlights. And they're both under, and I'm not a walking commercial, but they're both under our Physician Leadership Institute that Val is a wonderful part of, and Raj and I lead. One is we met a system on the West Coast. We've been in touch with them, but spent an hour with them yesterday just learning what are they doing in clinician physician development, and how could we help catalyze that. And just to see, despite all the headwinds, despite all the turmoil, really good systems that say we have to develop clinician leaders. The tools that got you to be a great surgeon or a great intensivist are not the tools necessarily, we'll talk about this more, they're going to make you a great leader. So just to hear this system and what it's doing and how potentially we as a leadership firm could help them, that was really cool. And I hope, Raj, you got the same sort of, wind in the sails. The second is we also do, Val and I, so Val and Raj are certified coaches. I'm more of the mentor, but I mentored a physician today that my colleagues know. And just to brainstorm for an hour on, boy, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this is a problem. And then just having us come together to brainstorm around, you don't have to ask for $1 million, but maybe you could do this, and maybe you could develop this bridge, and maybe you could think about this when you talk to your boss. I thought to myself just how lucky I am to be able to take the journey that I've been on as a leader and maybe provide a nugget to that person for the day. It's been despite the headwinds, and folks know I still do some part-time consulting for the federal government. There's a lot of things to be upset about, but boy, there's some really smart people rolling in the same direction.
Mike, Valerie, thank you. The reason why I asked that question is because when we get caught up with the headwinds, and again, every day there's stuff going on. Obviously, I'm of Indian descent. There was an air crash that happened in India this morning. I mean, there's stuff going on that's just bad, right? But when we look at the highlights, we need to continue to do this individually and with our teams and organizations to not forget, the impact that we're having and the positivity that we can also encourage. So that's why I want to start with the highlights. Valerie, this one's for you to start with, and then obviously I'll have each of you answer this. But what is the biggest surprise you had when you first moved from being a clinician, practice leader into that executive leadership role? You talked about that transition. What did you learn about yourself? What was the surprise for you?
Well, one of the things that I would say is I just gave you a little bit of a synopsis earlier about my career progression, but I had a very gradual ascent into the higher leadership roles, and I got my feet wet with sort of beginning leadership positions along the way. But in my first real leadership position, I would say, being a medical director of a clinic, I did not know, not only did I not know how to read a financial statement, I barely knew what one was.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I better figure out what this is, because all of a sudden there's a whole language I don't know. So, you're not an expert. So you're an expert clinician, but when you're sitting around the table, you're going to the CEO of the hospital, which I did, trying to get new space for our clinic, the CMO, etc., chief nursing executive. I didn't speak their language. I needed to speak their language, and I was no longer an expert. So I had to become one, like
And
overnight.
is that did you actually say that to yourself or say out loud, saying that this is not, something I'm an expert in yet, and I need
Yeah.
guidance?
I
You actually put it
actually,
out there. Yeah.
I went to the CFO and I
Yeah.
said, can you sit down and help me explain to me all these
Yeah.
things you send me every month that have numbers on them and dollar signs?
What do
And
these
he
numbers
did. He
mean?
was a
Yes. Okay.
lovely person, and he
Yeah.
did that to me. And I left the room like with rudimentary skills to understand them. And I think through my whole career, I've realized like I'm learning a new language, I'm learning a new skill set. I'm going to have a deliberate
Yeah.
approach to getting better as I needed. That's why I got the master's sort of like mid-career. Um, it's like, you know, you wouldn't go take somebody's appendix out without going to medical school or,
Yeah.
you know, ideally doing a surgical residency. So you can't
I
go
think
running around being an executive in healthcare without having the skills and knowing the language.
so. For folks listening to this conversation right now, in terms of like that working through that surprise, would you say to them that they should kind of put that out there if they want to get into those leadership ranks? Should they kind of
Mhm.
raise the hand and say, well, I don't know this and I want to learn it? What advice would you give them just based on what you're learning is?
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn it somehow.
Yeah.
Either by, so if you're if you're a clinician in a division and your division leader or your department leader
Yeah.
has, they all have financial statements.
Yeah.
Do they share them at your faculty meetings? Do they share them at your department meetings? If not, ask them to, and then, you know, have whoever your finance person is, you could sit down and learn it. Um, of course, there's other ways you can learn it because everything's available online. You could probably go on Coursera and take a basic, you know, financial literacy, you know, financial
Yeah.
statement class. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get that knowledge now. And it's one way to show like you're interested in knowing these things. And you know, that's how you become. I always say like, I see a lot of young people. I want a leadership position in healthcare, so I'm going to go get a MBA. And it's like, well, that's really not how you do it. You do it by having leadership roles and you have to start out small. So maybe you're chairing a committee, maybe you're being on like, you know, QA for the hospital or whatever. Maybe you're taking a leadership role within your department. Like that is, and then the MBA is, I think for me, I feel like it's a little later when you kind of know what you need to know or know what you want to know.
Oh, that's wonderful. I want to keep going. So, Mike, you have a choice here. You can continue to answer the same question, or we can go on to another question.
You know, Your Honor, I'll take question one and just go to. So, question one was surprises.
Exactly.
I'll take surprises for 500, Jack.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Take
Also,
surprise.
two things. I was really blessed. I'm still blessed because I get to work with you wonderful folks. I was only 10 years out of fellowship when I took on associate chief medical officer for a $4 billion system. And I'm not any Doogie Howser, but just being 10 years out of fellowship, that's a really finite period of time. So I was very lucky that I was given that opportunity. And I was an intensive care doc. So I was almost an associate professor. I was like an ICU doc, has to have confidence and, you know, some moxie. And you take on these roles and you learn quickly humility. So just Val's point of, they put a statement of operations or they give you a scorecard on, you know, how many DRGs we're billing at, and like I can read an EKG, but I can't bloody read this. So number one surprise was, and I agree with Val, I think clinician/physician leaders in healthcare are really important because we keep the patient at the center of all we do. We've trained hard to be there. We understand the intricacies and the nuances of healthcare. I think it's important, but boy, the skill set is different. So I was shocked and surprised, number one, how I had to learn rapidly. And Val and I both went back and got masters, which I thought was important. The second was I thought I understood as a physician in the physician's lounge complaining of, oh, administration doesn't understand because they're doing this. The enormity of the issues that come across higher and higher levels within the C-suite. You know, there was an incident in the OR and we're out of this particular antibiotic, or there's a lawsuit from this person, or we're dealing with a labor relations issue in this, like these are not small issues. So maybe your friends think you went to the dark side and you're kind of sitting in the lounge eating shrimp cocktail and having lattes. That is not the case. These issues that help, and I think now fast forward to 2025, these issues are probably 2 to 3-fold higher. So I was surprised by the number one, how much I needed to learn, and number two, just the ginormous nature of the issues that healthcare administrators grapple with.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so let's kind of build on that. So I guess in your early days, as you kind of alluded to, what was the habit that you took from your clinical background that helped you, and what did you have to unlearn? Like what was the habit that you said this is useful as you kind of progress into leadership, and what did you have to basically forget?
It gets tougher as you go up the food chain. but I
Mhm.
was 50% clinical, 50% administration. So I had a nice balance of being an ICU doc and being a clinician. So being present, rounding on the wards, being in the ICU, talking to the nurses about last night's shift, going to the ER just to walk around. So I think that a clinician being present, and especially as you, even in the clinical world, as you become a medical director or division chief, you are walking around your territory, right? You want to know what's going on. How's patient flow? Is anybody unhappy? So I tried to take during that time, still being present. The second thing I took away, which I try still to this day, is, to be on top of your game as an intensivist, an internist, a surgeon. You got to read, you got to keep current, you got to go to conferences. And I started to try and do the same thing with leadership. I never read HBR. I never looked at that, like the Wall Street Journal. Why would I read that? I got to read, PICU Annual or whatever the journal was. So I also then tried to bring as much rigor to learning the business and the leadership stuff as I did to the medical stuff. And I didn't really have to unlearn anything. I just really miss the ICU, and I still miss it to this day. But that's the, Val brought it up. That's the sacrifice. If you love being exologist, as you start to take on administrative roles, are you really still a good exologist? Because you don't want a rusty PICU doc taking care of your grandchild.
So Valerie, what about you? What did you feel like you had to, from a habit perspective that you think is really useful to carry forward, and what did you maybe have to unlearn?
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm an internist. I think internists are really well suited to leadership careers because we're so used to ambiguity. Same thing with Mike, your clinical background, tolerance for ambiguity. You don't always know what's going on with the patient. You got to figure it out. You've got to problem solve. So I think tolerance for ambiguity helps. And I think also the triage function. So I remember early in my leadership career, people come to you with their hair on fire about something.
Crisis. Yeah.
And you learn like there are times when you just need to listen, and that's all you need to do. And then there are times where you need to take immediate action. And I think as clinicians, you get that, you understand that. I think as a leader, sometimes you have to learn what's what because it's not the same as clinical medicine. You don't have a lab assay. And sometimes people come to you with things that are very self-serving to make it seem like an emergency, to see if they can like play you a little bit to do what you want and to test you out
No,
to
not
see
in healthcare,
if you're tough.
Val. Come on.
And I was a division chief at 35. I had no business doing that.
Wow.
But I
Wow.
was, and I learned, but I think the clinical stuff really helps you. And the
Yeah.
wisdom, like, 'cause when you see patients as an internist, like you just have to know, is this chest pain something I need to send this person to the ER for and start, a heparin drip or whatever? Or is this something it's okay and they need reassurance? This is something else, not a heart attack. And it's the same thing in leadership, actually.
So is the unlearning like the ability to kind of stop and listen? Because I feel like with docs, it's always a go, go, go triage. Like
Yes,
so that kind of pausing is probably a bit of an unlearn.
that's the unlearning. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's unlearning, like you don't always have to take action. You sort of
Yes.
learn that,
Yes.
those early jobs, I was 50-50 too. So you're like, yeah, you're learning both things at once as a newish attending because I was so young doing these things.
Wow.
But I think also the other thing I think it's important is influence. So
Mhm.
I learned that I couldn't, so you're a doctor and the patient's listening to you, you're kind of like the authority.
Yes.
You're not, you might have a title, but the title only gets you so far with your colleagues.
Yes.
You have to use you have to use other softer skills, influence skills to really lead.
And maybe so that kind of gets into this next question that I'm really curious to get your take on. So, when you think about these shifts from clinical to, executive leadership, decision making is a really big area that I notice this with people I'm coaching, the way we think about the institute, like how is the nature of decision making different, you think, from
Mhm.
from a clinician perspective to a C-suite leader? What does that look like? What have you noticed?
Yeah. Well, I think usually clinical decisions are you have your knowledge base, you have data you've gathered from the patient, and you just make a decision. Now, sometimes you have clinical guidelines to help you. When you're in a leadership role, especially those top leadership roles, you need to consult with a whole bunch of people often, and your decision is going to influence and affect a lot of different people. And so if you're just making decisions and telling people this is what we're doing, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So it's completely different. You might use a lot of skills such as like, well, you're gathering data to make your decision. Usually in clinical medicine, you're not running it by a whole bunch of people unless like you need specialists or consults or something. You're making the decision yourself along with the patient. This is now a whole different and you're just, other people are making the decision with you often in tandem. And you're having to communicate it through a lot of channels and, um, taking a change management approach, right?
So what's a pitfall then for people that are making that, that kind of basically transition to, from
Yeah.
clinical to what do they have to,
I think
yeah, what's
you and I
on?
have seen it, and without breaking a confidence, Raj and I have a wonderful client. She was an emergency medicine physician, now taking on a big role, and I could just see a great ER doc. She could, triage and not get flustered and manage 20 patients, and she brought a lot of leadership skills. But that ER doc came out every once in a while in the middle of a C-suite discussion of, well, I think I never was in the C-suite, of course, but I could hear that ER triage voice come out. And it's great because you can calm the ship down, resuscitate so well. But I think with some coaching and modulation, we had to say that she couldn't use the ER voice all the time. There are different, maybe more diplomatic, maybe more inclusive, maybe more listening than talking. So I think, all three of us have seen across this country, there are great clinicians that have risen in the ranks because they're good docs. They have done a great job. They've developed people. They're good mentors. But then it takes a little bit of introspection and some coaching and input to say, you don't always have to use the ER full code blue triage voice. And I think I know she's doing incredible work because of some just insight and maybe a little bit of a mirror of that doesn't have to always be the MO.
So Mike, there's a mantra there that is coming to mind. It's kind of go slow to go fast, right? So she had to slow down and kind of not just go into triage mode, slow down, and then it speeds back up. Because I think clinical leaders can get impatient, right? Going, why is this not, because I'm used to things going fast.
Yep.
And it may feel like we're slowing things down, but what ends up happening in the long run is they end up going faster because they do realize that that's how you get traction by influence.
Yeah, and you mentioned your mantra, go
Yeah.
slow to go fast. I think I shared with you my mantra the other day, which is speed kills, in parentheses, relationships.
Yes, I love that one. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, if you want to just get something done quickly, and not running it by a bunch of people, you might not get it. You might get it done, but you have ruined a bunch of relationships. So
Oh, great advice. Okay, so we have one more question, then we're gonna go to this kind of lightning round mode. So you guys are excited, I'm sure, because you don't know what to
Just
expect.
so excited.
yeah, we
Yes.
don't know what these questions are going to be. This is
Exactly. That's why
live television,
it's
folks.
live.
This is
To make it
spellbinding.
interesting. So here's the last question is, Mike, this one's to you. If you could go back and whisper to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself earlier? What would be at the start of your journey? You're earlier out. What piece of advice would you give yourself in terms of kind of navigating your journey? If there's anything you do differently.
You and I have talked about this book before, the David Brooks and the Second Mountain. For those that are of a certain age, it's a really interesting book. The first mountain is, I got to get the corner office. I got to make director of this program. I got to make associate professor. I am on the first mountain. It's the corner office or whatever it is. And then there's a valley. It's a health issue. You age, there's a divorce, there's a major life event, you get fired. And then there's the second mountain where what you're doing is more designed that you want to make an impact and have a great legacy and be really, I was trained by the Jesuits. You bring magis, you bring more to the equation. So I think my younger self, I would say, just make sure the first mountain goals are the right ones. I'm not saying that there was no nefarious goals, but there was just such an intense gunner-like attitude at some points in my career to get advanced and to get along the way. And second, you hit a certain age and you just hopefully take time to just appreciate the journey. Like I wish I would have journaled a little more and appreciated wow, I'm very fortunate and blessed to be in this. So for any folks of a certain age who want to think about the next chapter, I think The Second Mountain is a really great book.
Okay, what about you, Valerie? What's that?
Yeah, well, this one I've struggled with. I've been thinking about this for the last few days, and I think what Mike said is true in my case. Um I think we're the kind of people in medicine who all along we can be like perfectionists and we can really thrive off, acclaim, right? So we can really be like um rewarded. Our reward centers go off by like not only taking care of patients, but by like achievement because we've been people that are very achievement oriented. But I think one of the things that I would say, I don't know if you can read this. This is a little
Yeah, yes, you
plaque
can.
that
Yeah,
says,
sure.
yes, you can. And I was given this by my dean when I was thinking I was a vice dean and he was encouraging me to apply to be a dean. And I said, like, why would I want to do that? Um, and I think the imposter syndrome thing. And he found this somewhere and he bought this for me. And I keep it on the corner of my desk. And I think it's just, I think I would tell my young self, um, you know, yes, you can. You deserve to be here, you know.
I love it. It's great. Okay, you guys both are so good at kind of just sharing your perspective on these points, and I love the way you kind of feed off each other. So these I call it enlightening round. It's just a couple questions. This first one, burnout is a big issue right now, right? We're hearing it everywhere. You guys talked about it. How do you guys recharge, and what does your perfect Saturday look like?
Huh.
Wow.
Wow,
I
this would
love
be
living in our nation's capital, despite the thunderstorms and turmoil. So a perfect Saturday is my better half, Francesca, who you both know, finding something fun to do in DC and just trying to leave the cell phones behind and the task list behind and just disconnect. I think even in the consulting world, and this is my consulting chapter, which is really fun. I just think you're so hyper connected to deadlines and deliverables and it's just I think important to disconnect.
Awesome. Valerie, how about you?
Yeah, I have to say similar. I think Mike and I are similar in that we both are on our second, a major long-term relationship. I'm engaged. I'm getting married in a few months. And we could talk about sometime. I don't know your story, Mike, but we could talk about whether your career had any impact on,
Oh
your
yeah.
relationship. And I think mine, it did.
Oh yeah.
In trying to raise two kids and trying to do what I was doing. But anyway, I now have this wonderful partner and I just like a perfect Saturday would be time to spend with him. And just getting up, going to the farmer's market, finding something to cook for dinner, to go on a hike, all those wonderful things, recharging.
I love it. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Okay, next question. Mike, you did talk about Second Mountain, but I'm curious, what's something that you're reading right now, a podcast article? You're so good at kind of sharing things that you think would be interesting for this group. What's kind of got your attention?
So it's actually formulating a podcast, which is easier. It just rolls out. Well, I'm just going to start a podcast, because that's what we do. We do podcasts. So I'm now in charge of. We've got this thing called the Jesuit Friends and Alumni Network. So it is across the nation. I think we have 14 chapters in cities across America. And if you can use the word Jesuit in a sentence, you went to high school, you went to college, you appreciate how the Jesuits educate. We once a quarter have a luncheon in your town where we bring a speaker that's just some sort of inspirational leader, that's some sort of inspirational, that someone has been impacted by the Jesuits. So I'm now trying to figure out how and it's an energized kind of luncheon because you get to meet new people, hear amazing speakers, and you don't have to be from a particular school. Like it's not the Georgetown Alumni Association. It is a whole bunch of different people in a city. So we're now trying to translate that to if I can't get to Nebraska to hear the Creighton speaker, how can we bring that live? So my work, and it doesn't help me disconnect because it's a lot of work. My interesting task is now listening to a lot of podcasts to figure out what's the Q&A sort of cadence, what makes a good guest, how do you actually do this well? So it's not really reading, it's more figuring out podcasts.
Oh, so cool. Valerie, how about you?
Yeah. So right now I'm reading Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers, what we should know about the people that we don't know.
Ooh.
And it's not a recent book. I think it's somewhere in the middle of his books. And it's about like miscommunications. And it's a really good book. There's a lot of history in it. How Hitler was able to fool Chamberlain and so many other people. Why we tend to believe people, and we tend we have a bias toward wanting toward the truth, or thinking that people are being upfront with us, like, oh no, I'm not going to invade Poland, don't worry. So usually we err on the side of trusting. There's another example he uses where there's somebody in the CIA, embedded in the CIA, who was basically working for Cuba and who had this 30-year very successful career in the CIA. So it's a fascinating book too if you like history. I think what attracted me, I was in New York City last weekend for a family wedding, and I was just browsing around in one of their wonderful bookstores. And it just appealed to me, and I thought about it as very useful in my work because I do nothing really. I do a lot of meeting new people and trying to flesh them out, which I think is a strength of mine that I really enjoy. But it's just an interesting book on first impressions and how we might be misled by thinking people are one way and they're a different way.
Oh, that's a great one. So for the audience out there, we're gonna open up Q&A here in a second. So please put your questions in there. I know we're jonesing to hear from you guys, but I've got two more questions for Valerie and Mike in this kind of enlightening round. This next one is what's something you learned recently that surprised you? And I've got one, but I want to ask each of you, what's something that you learned that was surprising to you that you picked up? Actually, as you answer, let me go first. I'll give you an
Work
example.
related.
Yeah, anything. But so you said something, Valerie, about this miscommunication. How many of you, when you get all the spam emails or whatever, you hit unsubscribe, you're thinking that it's actually going to get you off the list. Don't hit unsubscribe, because that actually, what we're learning now is that that button is actually another target that they use to hook you
Ugh.
back in. So
Yeah,
don't hit
because you're somebody that
unsubscribe.
read the email, therefore, oh geez,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So don't hit that. Just delete it, block it, whatever. But the unsubscribe button is actually, because it's a trust challenge that you think, oh, I'm going to get myself off the list. Don't hit that button. That was
Ugh,
all.
that's disappointing.
I know. Sad. Okay. How about each of you? What's something you learned that surprised you?
It's surprising in a bad way, and I've known it, but I'm getting more concerned. And as Raj and Val know, I still do some consulting on pediatric disaster response. It kind of tugs at my PICU gene and my public health gene. And the fragility, and America is blessed to have 200 children's hospitals across this nation, anywhere between the huge metropolis of CHOP to 100-bed children's hospitals. We're very blessed to have these assets. I'm more and more concerned that the pediatric bed capacity, the pediatric infrastructure in this country continues to deteriorate at the same time where vaccine preventable diseases are on the rise. So that bad curve of decreasing number of beds and increasing burden on children's assets is very disconcerting to me as a public health planner. It's not a good thing I've learned. It's a very concerning thing.
It's challenging. Okay. Valerie, you have one?
Well, my first instinct was how much even having a small wedding costs and how easy it is to float it into a big wedding. But that's not really great for this webinar. I'm going to say that I continue to be surprised. I'm working with somebody doing coaching, and I'm doing 360 interviews so that we can help this person develop further as a leader. They are a great leader, but it's so surprising always. We're reminded that your own perception of yourself is, so as I say, I can never see the back of my head or my butt, if this is a family friendly thing. There's certain parts of your body you can't see. Yeah, you can hold a mirror up, which is what a 360 does, and other tools. But it's always surprising to me that what you hear from other people in a 360, and the person has like no idea that they're blind spots. And that's what we can do with coaching. We can help people to we can gently reveal to them their blind spots.
He's how you showed up. I love that. So true. Okay, I'm going to open it up to Q&A now. There is one that's come in. And again, please, others, we want to hear from you. And this came into the webinar chat. So the question was, do you have specific advice for MDs who are not US board certified, but want to get into hospital leadership, other than great tips you've already given? So is there anything else that you would suggest for how to get into hospital leadership?
Not board
It is,
certified. Yeah.
yeah, it is a headwind for sure, because it's a lot easier for an MD that was the medical director, division chief, and the ER, and then the chair, and then. But I have several friends that are not board certified, that are international medical graduates, that just do really good work and continue to get recognized. And I've got two. We actually wouldn't. They don't say that they're physicians very often. Like, they don't have MD after their tag. They just do great work, and then you learn that they actually have completed medical school somewhere else. So it's not really concrete advice, but I think if you can bring in the medical knowledge you can on a regular basis as you interact with other leaders and do your work, I think eventually over time that will be rewarded. And I know for a fact that international grads bring a lot to the fabric of healthcare in this country. I think they're terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Good. I don't see, are there any other questions that are coming in? I guess this is to our team. Are you guys saying anything? Because if not,
Not yet.
I can kind of hit, oh, here's one.
Here's another one.
Yeah.
Just came in.
So what do you recommend to non-clinical leaders to offer MD and all clinical professionals to take? So I guess the path to management.
Non-MD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take there? What's a good?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other clinicians, pharmacists and, nurses and all that have pathways to leadership. There's all kinds of leadership that's needed, by different professionals in healthcare. And those pathways may be a little different. I think the first thing is always to lead within your specialty, right? So if you're whatever the nursing leadership pathways are within your specialty, within the specialty of nursing, and the same with, say, pharmacy or whatever else it would be, that you get positions there, and then you're able to, nurses, obviously CNO, but we had a CEO at a big health system here where I'm located that was a nurse. She's CEO of the whole health system. So, similar pathways like me, I started out within my specialty. Mike started out like within his specialty, in his local environment, and then you go outside of your specialty eventually to higher leadership.
We have an entire presentation on it, and I've learned this from Raj and Val. Never underestimate and always overemphasize the important role of sponsors, mentors, and allies. It's just foundational to the work we do when we meet leaders that want to advance. And just for definitions, and my colleagues will correct me, an ally is your friend, your chum, your partner that you can go to the water cooler and just talk. And we've all got allies that help us get through. And college buddies, current colleagues, Val and Raj are in my allies category. So, that's a core group that gets you through. Mentors are folks that can help you help show you the way. They've been there, done that, or they know the path, or they can offer great advice. And I've just been blessed to have amazing mentors. Sometimes you got to actively seek them out. This is an active, not a passive sort of endeavor, but making sure you've got good mentors that you can bounce ideas off of. I used to call it, my professional or my personal board of directors. And then sponsors are the toughest. And once again, Val and Raj know this better than I, but sponsors are people that talk about you in a good way when you're not in the room. So you know what? Jean really did a nice job on that respiratory therapy project. Maybe we could consider her for this director role or give her other projects. So try and think and do a little reading around sponsors. How are there more people in your orbit that are going to say good things about you when you're not in the room? I don't know if I goofed up the definitions or what you guys think. But
you guys are just right. I would just add, Mike, they have the ability to influence. Right.
Yes.
So it's also, as you're looking to get promoted or, go to those positions of higher, places, those sponsors actually have the ability to influence that opportunity. So I think I think we've read and learned and researched is we don't spend enough time on sponsors, and we probably spend more time on kind of mentors and allies, and we need to get better at identifying sponsors and getting that help. It's great. I love it. So now we're getting some really good questions coming in. So I'm just going to hit them as we go through. Valerie, I'd love for you to take this one. This is about how do you deal with imposter syndrome? I know we've talked about this with some of our coaching work, but what is your take on, that's a term that's been out there now. What is your read on how do we deal with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think I have dealt with it by realizing that everybody feels that way.
Mm.
Unless you're like a narcissist. I think almost everybody feels deep down
Even
like
they do, as we recently know,
I
even the narcissists realize,
I think
maybe not.
that especially as the higher you get and the lonelier it is, and you're like, what the heck, and who can I turn to for advice? And how did I, it's lonely at the top. I think that, and you spend all your time with lawyers.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that the higher you up, by the way, this is the surprising thing. The higher you go, the more time you spend with lawyers, like
yeah.
dealing with legal issues in
Every
organizations.
week, every week.
Yeah, hours every week. I think that you just realize that everybody feels that way. It is a human, it is actually your inner humility. It's a healthy thing in a way, because it's your inner humility. Like as a clinician, you would make patient mistakes if you didn't question, do I have the right diagnosis?
Yep.
Not like in a way that's crippling, like every 5 minutes, but like once in a while, taking a step back, like, do I have this right? Am I doing this right? Same thing with leadership. So it's a healthy dose of imposter syndrome is healthy, so much that it prevents you from applying to positions. Like we hear, women won't apply as much as men if they even have one thing that's not on the list of qualifications for a role. Whereas men, if they're even, a little bit close, like, oh yeah, I can apply. So, there's a healthy dose of imposter syndrome, I think. That's my take on it anyway.
It's good.
My cure, and I remember the smells and the sights and the feelings the first day of medical school at Case Western. I loved going to Case Western, and I was like, what am I doing here? There must have been a typo. I am not
Same.
supposed to be here. And as Val said, everybody felt that way. When you got to know people about it, they're like, what am I doing? And over time you become close. I found as I became an intensive care doc, morbidity and mortality was the cure for imposter syndrome, because like Marine Corps boot camp, it strips everybody down to the basic. They look at every case, every mistake, every hiccup, because my boss used to say, what we do is too important to take it for granted. And we would dissect why wasn't the antibiotic given within this hour? Why didn't you notice that chest x-ray finding? And the reason I say it's a cure for imposter syndrome and not a catalyzer is everybody was brought to the same level of humility, because the task of being a physician is so important. And in my mind, the task of being a healthcare leader is so important that put the imposter syndrome to a side and just get better at it, man. Just like become a Marine and fight through the pain. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's how I think of it.
So we got 3 more minutes. I'm going to try to get 2 more questions in to the degree that we can. Mike, this one's for you. Do you have any advice for early in career physicians, residents, and fellows on how to start the path? Asking as an incoming pediatric chief resident with a master's in health policy.
Oh, number one, congrats on being a chief, because I was a chief, Val was a chief, and it can be a thankless job because nobody's happy with the bloody call schedule. So that can be the downside of being a chief. Embrace the chief year, because I hope the chief year is probably 70% clinical and 30% administration. I just made those numbers up. Be a great leader, be a great teacher, take good care of patients, make sure the residents know that you're their mentor and their supporter. But you've got now, like an administrative fellow, I saw a question about that. You've got a chance to learn from so many different square inches of that system on how the chairs lead and how the VPs lead. So congratulations, enjoy it. Be a good clinician first. Like I give advice to young fellows and residents that want to get an MBA and become a CMO at age 12. Like, no, be a good clinician first, but congrats on being a chief. That's going to be a great year for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Valerie, this last one's for you. So this one is impact and drive or emotional intelligence. It seems that being nice wins in the leadership trajectory game today. I think the question there is, how do you balance ambition and drive versus kind of having that compassion, empathy, EI, kind of skills? What do you think it takes to navigate?
Well, I think I think it's important that the ambition drive is coming from your purpose, which is to make things better, to take care of people, that it's coming from through a selfless thing, not as a oh, I just want to get ahead and have the corner office thing. I think, what was the second part of that?
And the emotional intelligence. So how do you
Oh yeah,
balance?
the emotional intelligence. So,
Yeah.
somebody said to me recently, somebody who was a dean at for a long time, basically said to me, these jobs at these levels are no longer about skill.
Yeah.
They're
Wow.
about relationships.
Yep.
You could be, I mean, hopefully you have both, right?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
triad, but they're way more about relationships. The higher you get, the people you slip up and step in things and or get fired because of that piece of it, not like, are you actually good at your job? And actually, well, that's part of being good at your job. So,
Yeah.
but the operational piece.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'd say to that for that.
Well, I know there was a lot more questions that I'm sorry we couldn't get to everyone, but I love the fact that people are putting questions in there and we try to answer at least a couple. I'm going to turn it back over to the Hillary folks to close this out. But thank you, Valerie and Mike, for just allowing me to
My
ask my
pleasure.
surprising questions.
My
Nice job,
pleasure.
MC.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can turn it back.
Live.
There you go. Darren, oh, you're muted. Back to you.
Thank you, Raj, and special thanks to Dr. Weber and Dr. Anderson for participating and supporting today's webinar for our participants. Dr. Anderson kind of took away some of my closing remarks with the mentor, sponsor, and ally part, something I generally tend to like to talk about as well. When asked, I like to give it a short, brief summary. A sponsor will speak for you, whereas a mentor speaks with you. And, pairing that with everything that we've gotten from the last webinar on sponsors, allies, and mentors, I think that's another valuable takeaway to continue to reiterate and to share amongst our aspiring leaders. Another key takeaway from this, it's good to hear that, that even though that the challenges and the climb in healthcare leadership is something that is unique to whether you're clinical or non-clinical. The fact is, it's still a climb, it's still a journey. And you have to look at it as if you're participating in a marathon and not a sprint. This is something you have to continue to persist at, continue to work with, network, leverage people like Dr. Weber was saying before. It's about who you know. It's not necessarily about what you know all the time. And get somebody to mention your name in that room of people who have the ability to make those decisions and have that power to influence. And when you are given that opportunity, make sure that you take full advantage of that opportunity and use that to just springboard yourself into the next possible step. So once again, thank you to the entire Whitkiefer team for taking the time to share their wisdom and knowledge with our participants on today's call. Next slide, please. So, as we were mentioning before, this educational event is a qualifying education event for 1 credit. You will have to self-report these credits in the ACHE website. You log onto your My ACHE and then make sure you take today's title of the event and report your credits accordingly. So that way you're responsible for getting the credits assigned to your ACHE profile. Next slide, please. Taking a look at some of the upcoming events. Over the next couple of days for this month, we have 2 events coming up. We have the Way Up, a real talk on leadership and identity, which is a virtual event. We have a very important speaker, Dr. Errol Pierre, who has published a book and who has been sharing a lot of his wisdom with the organization. So our DEI committee has worked to secure him for a fireside chat. And a springboard and an offshoot from today's event for those that are interested is about navigating the transition from fellowship to early career success, which is also coming up at the end of the month. Next, we have another virtual event in July about lessons learned in supporting healthcare worker mental health and resilience. Was actually something that springboarded as a result of a seminar and workshop that was held at Mount Sinai. So now we want to share that with all of the HLNY members, regardless of the health system that you're a part of. One of our best events, one of my favorite events personally, is our Past President's Boat Cruise. Be sure to sign up for that and save your seat because tickets for that will go fast. Coming up in October, a little further ahead, taking a look, the mini Congress at the New York Academy of Medicine. We are scheduled to have 3 panelists. We are looking to secure credits from ACHE on that. which is something that we normally do. We just can't advertise the credits yet because we haven't finalized our panelists and we haven't received the formal approval. But rest assured, this is something that HLNY is working on securing for all of our members. And, in November, we have our annual Frank Camerano dinner. And to end up the year, we have our 2025 holiday party. The dates for those two last events will be announced shortly, so be sure to subscribe to our events. Next slide, please. Be sure to take a look at our website and subscribe to upcoming events, and to make sure that you're in the know about what's coming up from HLNY to its members. Next slide. One thing that we like to take as the month is running down, we'll take a moment to remind everybody about the waiver, the fee waiver for the Board of Governors exam. You still have time to get your application to sit for the Board of Governors exam approved. And when you pass the exam, all of your fees that you paid for it will be waived. And having earned the FACHI credential is something that will set you apart from other healthcare leaders. And this is the only board certified distinction offered in the industry for healthcare leaders. Next slide, please. HLNY works closely with the HLNY Foundation to support financially our upcoming healthcare leaders. So the HLNY Foundation continues to encourage supporting this endeavor by contributing and donating to the scholarships that are offered to our upcoming careerists. On the screen, you'll see a lot of our scholarships that are being sponsored right now at the current moment. So be sure to take a look, and if you're interested in subscribing and sponsoring by way of finances to this endeavor, be sure to take a look at the QR code and scan that to your phone. Next slide, please. And one thing we like to make sure of is that we recognize our sponsors for this event and all of our other events. It's more than just the dollars that they contribute to the organization. It's their support of the development of healthcare leadership, which is more critical to really give appreciation to. And if it wasn't for our sponsors at these different levels, that we would really be hard pressed to bring these types of educational events to our membership at large. Last slide. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you work for an organization, you can contact sponsors at hlny.org. And over here, you can follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. And next slide. That should be it, I believe. Thank you all. With that, we will close today's seminar. Thank you everyone again for attending. Hope everybody has a good day. Take care and be well.